Hi, class. So I wasn't happy with any of the recordings on Electa for the optics thing that happened during our disastrous week 9. So this lecture is for um, my Aristotle class and my Newton class, and it'll be in parts because I only upload a little bit at a time to YouTube. But so sorry that we had the Electa problems. But anyway, this is instead of that lecture that I gave in week 9 for those who could hear it about optics. All right, so for those of you in my Aristotle class, this Thales guy is somebody you've heard a great deal about. But we have several people in the Newton class who didn't take Aristotle first. And Thales is this guy who is said to be the first person to do this newfangled philosophy stuff. And he was a Greek in Ionia, so it wasn't even in Athens. This was hundreds of years, well, a couple hundred years before there was philosophical schools in Athens. And Thales measured the pyramid or estimated the height of the pyramid using his walking stick and similar triangles. So he had to use optics, and this is something that the Greeks were already doing. We haven't talked about this in the Aristotle class, the idea that he is using optics here. The way that he's using optics here is so he predicts that the shadow will fall in the same ratio for the tall thing as it does for the short thing. And in doing that, he's looking at the shadow falling along straight lines. This gets us to the early Greek concept that light was acting as a particle because we can observe light going in straight lines in straight lines. And the first place we see this is when Thales is talking about casting shadows and measuring things based on the ratio of those things. Shadow is a very important thing to the ancients. In Plato's most famous allegory, so Plato, even if you haven't taken my Aristotle class, you've probably heard of Plato. Wicked smart, as we said in Boston. Plato's most famous allegory is a story of something called the allegory of the cave. And it's a little bit hard to see in this picture, but in Plato's allegory of the cave, shadows are very important. And in Plato's allegory of the cave, we, all of mankind on this earth, are like prisoners chained in a cave. And we see shadows on the walls. We don't see what's really real. All we see are shadows that are cast because there's a fire at the opening of the cave and there are objects that are moved back and forth, and all we see are shadows, but our eye is being tricked. That's Plato's big idea with this. In the big story, which one of my Aristotle students reminded me of, in the full story of the allegory, one of these prisoners in the cave escapes and goes out to see what's really real. And these are the Platonic ideals of things when we talk about the ideal thing. And when he comes back into the cave to try to tell the other prisoners, and they don't believe him. They think he's a crazy man. So this idea of shadows and optical illusion is very important in early Greek philosophers. In my class on Plato, we've recently been talking about this. This is one of my favorite new art forms, and it really goes to what Plato was talking about in his allegory of the cave, which is how easily we can be fooled. So here we see a very detailed shadow of a man. We can even see the wrinkles in his clothing, what type of shoes he's wearing. You can almost imagine what he's wearing up here, his hairstyle, his face. And if I saw just this shadow, I would be very much convinced that I had seen evidence of a man, that a man was present there, and I had seen this man's shadow. But this shadow is actually created by all of this junk that an artist has put together, and there's a spotlight here, and it's creating this optical illusion. The Greeks very much understood the idea of optical illusions. Oh, I didn't put a picture of this. Let me get a picture. I don't know why I didn't put the picture of this. Parthenon optical illusions. I need to update my slide deck. The Greeks knew about the optical illusions um, of perspective drawing. Now, in my Newton class, we know that we didn't really start seeing this in art. We didn't start seeing this perspective drawing until about the time of Copernicus. And it's very important in Copernicus's understanding that his eye could be tricked. When he puts forth his ideas that our eyes are being tricked when we think that the sun goes around the earth. So that was because perspective drawing was being shown in Copernicus's time, but we don't see that in Greek art. So it's not that the Greeks didn't know about perspective. They knew about perspective, they just rejected it in their art form. They thought it was a negative thing that the eye was so easily tricked or so easily fooled. So the Parthenon itself is built so that it appears straight, so that the eye is tricked into thinking it is more straight and upright than a straight and upright thing. So the temple, if it was built actually straight, it would appear bowed like this due to perspective, the way our eyes process the world around us. So they built it in reverse of that, to reverse this effect, so that it appears to our eyes very straight and upright, even though it's a huge, huge structure. So the Greeks knew all about optical tricks for your eye to see things in 3D. They just rejected them in their artwork. So they had a sophisticated understanding of light. They also understood, the ancient Greeks also understood lenses, which is surprising. It's very surprising. So, but the first thing to understand about a lens is that a lens does not require a piece of glass to be in it. You can have a lens operating through just an open hole. Now, in both classes, we've seen this when people were building things like the solar observations for the change of the seasons. What is the name of that? Huge stones. Stonehenge, right. Sorry, I can't believe I couldn't remember Stonehenge. So they aligned things with the stars, with the seasons in their Stonehenges, their ancient observatories. So it makes sense that this hole would, now this is a film, this is obviously a modern film. It's Indiana Jones and the Ark. The Lost Ark. I forget the name of that. Oh, I'm just having a problem with words tonight. But in this one, he has a special jeweled thing on a staff that lines up geometrically with the stone. Now, I have no evidence of this particular setup actually being done, but all of this setup would have been well in line with what the ancient Egyptians and Greeks would have done or had available to them or known about. Now, we see an opening here that doesn't seem to be acting quite like a lens, but in a second we're going to see how it can operate more as a lens. And then it is concentrated here with a jewel, and in that jewel there is more of a lens that we would think of today that has glass in it. And we're going to talk about some evidence that the ancient Greeks had these lenses well before 1,000 years before Galileo's telescope. Okay, I have to cut these videos into under 10-minute marks, so I'm going to stop here at 9 minutes and go on to our next part 2.